2 months ago, I was supposed to be married. Instead, I'm here on what was meant to be our honeymoon, but with a plot twist that destroyed my family forever. Because that honeymoon? I didn't cancel it. I stole it back. And the person who was supposed to be my maid of honor? She's now blocked on every platform I have, along with the man I thought I'd spend my life with. But here's the thing that nobody expected, including me. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how the worst day of my life became the best decision I ever made. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why 2.3 million people have called me either a genius or a psychopath, and why I'm perfectly fine with both labels. I'm Ava Sinclair, and this is the story of how I turned my sister's betrayal into my greatest victory. But first, let me pour myself some champagne because, trust me, you're going to need a drink by the time I'm done. Oh, and stay until the end, because the final twist? Even I didn't see it coming. Let me paint you a picture of my life 6 months ago. I'm 29, living in a penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle that I worked my ass off to afford. I'm a senior publicist at one of the city's top PR firms, the kind of job where you're handling million-dollar book launches and celebrity scandals before your morning coffee gets cold. My life was methodical, planned, perfect. I had a 5-year plan, a retirement fund, and a skincare routine that cost more than most people's rent. I was that woman who meal prepped on Sundays and had her Christmas gifts wrapped by November 1st. And then there was Daniel. Daniel was everything I thought I wanted in a man. 6'2", photographer for National Geographic, had this way of looking at you like you were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen through his lens. We met at a book launch for this adventure memoir. I was handling the publicity. He was capturing the moment where the author broke down crying because his story had finally found its audience. I remember watching Daniel work that night. He wasn't just taking pictures. He was documenting human emotion. The way he moved through the crowd, anticipating moments before they happened. It was like watching an artist paint with light. After the event, he approached me. Not with some cheesy pickup line, but with a genuine question about the author's journey. We talked for 3 hours at a coffee shop that should have closed at 9 p.m., but the barista was so invested in our conversation that she let us stay until midnight. Within 6 months, Daniel had moved into my perfectly organized life and somehow made it better without disrupting my systems. He'd leave little notes in my planner. Remember to breathe today, or your presentation will be amazing, and he'd have dinner waiting when I worked late. He was the first man who never tried to fix me or change me. He just fit. The proposal happened on a random Tuesday. No grand gesture, no public spectacle. I came home from a brutal day. Our biggest client had just fired us, and Daniel was sitting on our couch with takeout from my favorite Thai place and a ring that wasn't flashy but was so perfectly me that I knew he'd been planning this for months. "Ava," he said, "I don't want to marry you because you're perfect. I want to marry you because you make imperfection look beautiful." I said yes before he finished the sentence. The ring was vintage Art Deco, exactly what I would have picked for myself if I'd ever allowed myself to dream about marriage. Later, I found out he'd spent 3 months working with an antique dealer to find it. He'd even brought my best friend, Sarah, to help him choose. That should have been my first red flag, how easily he could get the women in my life to help him with his plans. Now, let me tell you about my sister, Brielle. She's 26, and since the day she could walk, she's been stealing things that don't belong to her. Not objects, people. Attention. Moments. The spotlight. Growing up, Brielle was the one everyone noticed. Blonde where I was brunette. Outgoing where I was reserved. The kind of beautiful that makes photographers stop strangers on the street. I was the smart one, the responsible one, the one our parents relied on to keep Brielle out of trouble. But here's what people didn't see. Brielle couldn't stand it when I had something she didn't. In high school, she dated my boyfriend, not because she liked him, but because I did. In college, she applied to my dream internship after I'd already gotten it, then charmed her way into getting it instead by convincing them they needed someone more dynamic. The pattern was always the same. She'd see me happy, decide she wanted what I had, take it, then get bored and move on to the next shiny thing. But I thought, naively, that at 26, She'd outgrown this phase. That maybe watching me build a real life, a stable career, a healthy relationship would inspire her to do the same instead of trying to tear it down. When I asked her to be my maid of honor, she cried. Actually cried. Said it was the most meaningful thing anyone had ever asked her to do. Said she was proud of the woman I'd become and honored to stand beside me on the most important day of my life. I should have known better. Brielle only cries when she's planning something. The first sign something was wrong came during dress shopping. I'd found my dream dress, this elegant off-shoulder number that made me feel like a modern Grace Kelly. Brielle was there, along with my mom and my best friend Sarah, and everyone was crying happy tears. Except Brielle. She was quiet, distracted, constantly checking her phone. When I asked if she was okay, she said she was fine, just stressed about work. But then, as we were leaving, she made this comment that lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. It's crazy how different we are. You picked the safe choice. I would have gone for something with more passion. It was such a Brielle thing to say, passive-aggressive wrapped in fake concern. But something about the way she said it, looking directly at Daniel who had come to pick us up, made my stomach twist. 2 weeks later, Daniel started acting strange. Not dramatically different, just off. He'd be scrolling through his phone and suddenly flip it face down when I walked into the room. He started working late more often, taking calls that he'd step outside to answer. When I'd ask about it, he'd get defensive in this way that was so unlike him. Daniel was usually the most transparent person I knew. Suddenly, he was building walls I didn't even know existed. 3 weeks before the wedding, Brielle asked to practice her maid of honor speech with me. She said she was nervous and wanted to make sure it was perfect. We met at our favorite wine bar, the same place where she'd confessed her biggest secrets throughout our 20s. She pulled out her phone and started reading. Ava has always been the planner, the dreamer, the one who sees the best in everyone, sometimes to her own detriment. She loves so completely that she can't imagine someone would betray that trust. But that's what makes her beautiful. She believes in people even when they don't deserve it. I remember thinking it was a weird way to phrase things, but Brielle had always been dramatic. She continued, "Daniel, you're getting more than a wife. You're getting someone who will never see your betrayal coming because she's too pure to imagine it. Take care of that innocence. Or someone else might." I actually laughed. I thought she was being poetic, maybe even a little tipsy. I told her the speech was beautiful, but maybe tone down the betrayal theme since it was a wedding, not a therapy session. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Sometimes the most important truths come out at weddings, Ava. People can't keep secrets forever." Now I realized she wasn't practicing a speech. She was confessing. The night I found out, Daniel had been acting particularly strange. He kept checking his phone during dinner, barely touched his food, and when I suggested we watch our show, he said he had a headache and needed to shower. I wasn't snooping. I need you to understand that. His phone was on the nightstand, charging, and it lit up with a message preview. I glanced over out of habit, the same way you'd glance at a clock, and saw a name that made my blood freeze. Brielle. I can't wait to make this official. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. The message thread between them was extensive. Months of messages. I scrolled back to the beginning, and what I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. It started the day after our engagement party. Brielle had texted Daniel, "Congratulations. Ava looked so happy tonight." His response, "Thanks." Though I kept thinking about our conversation. What conversation? I whispered to myself, but I kept reading. The messages revealed everything. They'd been meeting for coffee, talking about how complicated the situation was, how they'd developed feelings but couldn't act on them because of me. There were photos, Daniel and Brielle at restaurants I'd never been to, hiking trails I'd never seen, in hotel rooms that made my stomach drop. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was reading their plans. They weren't going to tell me before the wedding. They were going to wait until after, use my wedding as a celebration, then break the news during our honeymoon. Daniel was going to call me from Santorini and tell me he'd realized he loved someone else. Brielle was going to be his shoulder to cry on when I came home heartbroken. They had planned to destroy me in the most calculated, cruel way possible. And they were excited about it. I screenshot everything. Every message, every photo, every detail of their timeline. Then I sat on our bathroom floor and cried until I threw up. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build your revenge. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at those screenshots, and something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Why Brielle had been so interested in our wedding plans. Why she'd insisted on helping with the seating chart. Why Daniel had been distant. Why they'd both been asking so many questions about our honeymoon itinerary. They weren't just betraying me, they were orchestrating my humiliation. But here's what they didn't know about me. I might be trusting, but I'm not weak. I might believe the best in people, but when you show me who you really are, I believe that too. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I was going to let them think their plan was working perfectly, right up until it wasn't. The first call I made was to our travel agent at 6 a.m. Hi, this is Ava Sinclair. I need to make some changes to our Santorini reservation. I upgraded everything. The basic suite became the presidential villa. I added a yacht charter, a private chef, spa treatments, wine tastings, helicopter tours, everything Daniel and I had looked at but decided was too extravagant. If they wanted to steal my honeymoon, I was going to make sure they knew exactly what they'd lost. Total cost, $47,000. Worth every penny. Next, I called our wedding planner, Miranda. She's this incredibly discreet woman who's handled celebrity weddings and political scandals. Nothing shocks her. Miranda, I need to discuss some last-minute changes to Saturday's event. Of course, darling. What are we thinking? The groom won't be attending. Neither will the maid of honor. I'd like to transform this from a wedding into a celebration of independence. There was a pause. Then, how dramatic do you want to get? I love this woman. We kept the venue, the flowers, the catering, the music, everything. But we changed the messaging. Instead of Ava and Daniel's wedding, the programs would read Ava's Liberation Celebration. The florist changed our romantic blush and cream color scheme to bold red and gold. The caterers transformed our plated dinner into a cocktail reception with my favorite foods. We kept the champagne tower, because who doesn't love a champagne tower, but added a signature cocktail called the Phoenix Rising. I had new invitations printed and hand-delivered to every guest Thursday night. They read, "The wedding is off, but the party is on. Join me as I celebrate the best decision I never knew I was making." Cocktail attire. Drama anticipated. Most importantly, I included a subtle note. Recent revelations have made this celebration necessary. Details will be shared appropriately. That was code for I have receipts, and you'll get them soon. Friday night, exactly 24 hours before my supposed wedding, I sent an email to our entire guest list. The subject line was simple: Tomorrow's celebration explained. I didn't write a sob story. I didn't ask for pity. I simply stated facts. Dear family and friends, tomorrow's event is no longer a wedding. It's a celebration of truth, self-respect, and the family I choose versus the family I was born into. Attached are the reasons why. Please know that I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but for clarity. Some of you have asked questions over the past few weeks about Daniel's distance and Brielle's involvement in wedding planning. Now you have your answers. I look forward to celebrating with those who truly love me tomorrow. With gratitude, Ava. P.S. There will still be an open bar. Then I attached every screenshot, every message between Daniel and Brielle, every photo, every detail of their plan to humiliate me. I sent it at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, my phone was exploding. Sarah called me crying, saying she'd suspected something but couldn't put her finger on it. My cousin Jake texted, "I knew I didn't like that guy. You're a queen for this." My mom called at 12:30 a.m., sobbing, asking how she'd failed so badly with Brielle. The most shocking response came from my dad at 1 a.m. "I'm proud of you. See you tomorrow." My dad never stayed up past 10 p.m., and he'd never called me after a family crisis. But something about my decision to fight back instead of fall apart had earned his respect in a way that 29 years of being the good daughter never had. Saturday morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, not because I was hiding, but because my mom had insisted on doing my hair and makeup one last time. She wanted to be part of my transformation. As she curled my hair, she told me something I'll never forget. I was so focused on protecting Brielle from her own poor choices that I forgot to celebrate your good ones. Today, I'm celebrating you. I put on my wedding dress, all $3,000 of elegant perfection, but I accessorized it differently. Instead of the delicate pearl earrings I'd planned, I wore the diamond studs my grandmother left me. Instead of the soft updo, I had my hair in loose waves. Instead of the shy bride smile I'd practiced, I walked into that venue like I owned it. Because I did. The venue was transformed. The red and gold flowers were dramatic against the white linens. The Liberation Celebration programs were elegant and bold. The champagne tower caught the light like a crystal waterfall. Our guests were buzzing with energy I'd never seen at a wedding. People were actually talking to each other instead of just waiting for the ceremony to start. There was this electricity in the air, like everyone was about to witness something historic. And they were. At 4 p.m., the exact time Daniel and I were supposed to say I do, I walked down the aisle alone. Not with my father, not with anyone. Just me in my wedding dress, carrying a single red rose instead of a bouquet. The music wasn't the traditional wedding march. It was Stronger by Kelly Clarkson. Not subtle, but effective. I reached the altar where our officiant, Pastor Matthews, was waiting with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. He'd agreed to perform a commitment ceremony, my commitment to myself. I turned to face our 120 guests and gave the speech of my life. Thank you all for being here today. I know this isn't the wedding you expected to attend, but it's the celebration I needed to have. 3 days ago, I discovered that the man I planned to marry and the sister I planned to honor had been planning their own celebration, at my expense. They intended to use this day, this venue, these flowers, your presence, to launch their relationship while I was none the wiser. But here's what they didn't count on. I am not a victim. I am not someone who falls apart when life doesn't go according to plan. I am someone who makes new plans. So today, instead of promising to love someone who has already broken that promise, I'm making a commitment to myself. To never again ignore red flags for the sake of keeping peace. To never again make myself smaller to make someone else comfortable. To never again confuse loyalty with stupidity. And to never, ever let anyone steal my joy without paying the price. The applause was thunderous. People were crying, cheering, some were filming. It felt like a revival meeting, and a TED Talk had a beautiful baby. What followed was the best party I've ever attended, and I'm not just saying that because it was mine. People were dancing like it was New Year's Eve. The champagne flowed, the food was incredible, and the energy was infectious. Guests kept coming up to me, telling me how inspired they were, how they wished they'd had my courage in their own situations. My grandmother's best friend, Dolores, who's 87 and usually needs help walking, grabbed my hands and said, "Honey, in my day, we would have just suffered in silence. You just showed a room full of people what self-respect looks like." The most surreal moment came when Sarah pulled me aside and confessed that Daniel had tried to get her to cover for him during the affair. He'd asked her to lie about his whereabouts if I ever asked. She'd refused but hadn't known how to tell me without proof. Suddenly, all those times people had seemed weird around me made sense. They'd all suspected something but felt powerless to act without evidence. Around 9 p.m., as the party was reaching its peak, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Someone had posted videos of my speech on TikTok. Within 2 hours, #AvaLiberation was trending. But the real validation came from the people in that room. My chosen family. The ones who stayed, who cheered, who celebrated my decision to choose myself over settling for betrayal. That night, I realized something profound. The wedding I'd planned would have been beautiful, but the celebration I created was transformative. The next morning, I flew to Santorini alone. Not heartbroken, liberated. The presidential villa was more beautiful than I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Aegean Sea, a private infinity pool, a terrace where I could watch the sunset with my morning coffee. I spent 5 days living like the queen I'd always been but never acknowledged. I took the yacht charter and danced alone on the deck. I had the private chef prepare foods I'd never tried. I got massages, took helicopter tours, bought art from local galleries without checking the price tags. But the most important thing I did was think. I realized that for most of my adult life, I'd been performing the role of the good girl, the reliable sister, the supportive girlfriend, the team player at work. I'd been so focused on being what other people needed that I'd forgotten to ask what I wanted. Sitting on that terrace in Santorini, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, I decided I wanted to be unapologetically myself. Ambitious, selective with my time, unwilling to accept mediocrity from anyone, including myself. On my last day, I posted the photo that changed everything. Me on the yacht, champagne in hand, with the caption, "He took my sister. I took the honeymoon." Within 24 hours, it had 50,000 likes. By the time I landed back in Seattle, it was viral. My inbox was flooded with interview requests, brand partnership offers, and messages from women sharing their own stories of betrayal and revenge. I'd been home for exactly 3 days when Brielle showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, mascara streaked, hair unwashed, looking like she hadn't slept since Saturday. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity won. "Ava, please. We need to talk." She pushed past me into my living room, and for the first time in our adult lives, she looked smaller than me. "You destroyed my life," she said, not even bothering with an apology. "I documented your choices," I replied. "You destroyed your own life." "He said you didn't love him anymore. He said you were just going through the motions, that the engagement was more about the wedding than the marriage." I actually laughed. "Brielle, I've seen the messages. You've been planning this since the day after our engagement party. Don't insult my intelligence with Daniel's lies." She broke down then, ugly crying on my white couch. I was drunk when it started. He was so charming, and he made me feel like I was special, like he saw something in me that no one else did. He saw that you were willing to betray your sister for male attention. Congratulations, you're exactly as special as he thought. The conversation lasted 2 hours. She alternated between blaming Daniel, blaming alcohol, blaming me for being too perfect, and making her feel inadequate. Never once did she take full responsibility for her choices. As she was leaving, she turned back and said, "Mom and Dad will forgive me eventually." "Family forgives." "Family doesn't forgive," I said. "Family enables." "I'm done being your family." But here's the twist that even I didn't see coming. Last week, I got a call from Daniel. Not begging for forgiveness, offering congratulations. Apparently, my viral moment had caught the attention of a production company. They want to turn my story into a documentary about modern betrayal and female empowerment. They've offered me $250,000 as an executive producer and the chance to tell my story on my terms. The documentary will finance the business I've always dreamed of starting, a PR firm specializing in crisis management for women. Because if there's one thing I learned from this experience, it's that I'm really good at turning disasters into opportunities. Daniel called to tell me he thought it was amazing and that he was proud of how I'd handled everything. The audacity was breathtaking. But then he said something that made me realize I'd won more completely than I'd ever imagined. Brielle and I broke up. Turns out, when a woman will betray her sister for you, she'll eventually betray you too. She's been seeing someone else for 3 weeks. I hung up without responding. Because the best revenge isn't letting someone know they hurt you. It's living so well that their opinion becomes irrelevant. 6 months ago, I thought I was planning a wedding. Instead, I planned a revolution. In my own life, in how I see myself, and in what I'm willing to accept from others. Some people called my celebration petty. Others called it inspiring. I call it the first day of the rest of my life. And Brielle? She's blocked on everything. Because family isn't about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, and love. And she forfeited all three. So if you've ever been betrayed, cheated on, or left wondering if you should forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, remember this. Sometimes the best revenge is a tan, a passport stamp, and a story that ends with you winning. Because I didn't just lose a fiancé and a sister. I gained something more valuable. The unshakable knowledge that I will never again accept less than I deserve. And that, my friends, is worth more than any marriage could ever be. Cheers to liberation. And to never, ever settling for less than your worth.
What would you have done? Comment below. And also subscribe for more unbelievable true stories. If this tale of sisterhood, betrayal and redemption reasoned with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, sometimes the path to healing begins with the very moment designed to break us.